Trump encounters homeless veteran woman. What happens next will leave you speechless. It was a bitterly cold November afternoon in Chicago. The city was alive with its usual chaos. People rushing to their destinations, the chatter of tours around Millennium Park, and the distant hum of traffic echoing through Michigan Avenue. Among the crowd was a figure that drew attention with every step he took. Donald Trump, dressed in a tailored long blue-black coat and his signature red tie, walked with a sense of purpose. Though he had just attended a high-profile meeting, he decided to walk back to his hotel, wanting to immerse himself in the city's vibrant energy. Before we dive deeper into this gripping story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Epic Story Moments. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Like, share, and comment to support more. Incredible stories like this. But as he approached the corner near Millennium Park, something unusual caught his eye. A woman sat huddled against the cold stone of a building, her thin frame wrapped in layers of tattered clothing. Her trembling hands held a piece of cardboard that read, "Veteran in Need. Please help." Trump's pace slowed, his usually brisk stride faltering. Something about her presence felt different. He had encountered homelessness countless times in major cities, but today, on this corner, the sight seemed to pierce through the layers of his typically composed demeanor. He stopped abruptly. The bustling crowd moved around him, some passers-by throwing curious glances in his direction, but most continuing on their way. Trump stood rooted, his gaze fixed on the woman. She didn't notice him at first, her head bowed, her eyes tired and distant. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he should intervene. Then, as if guided by instinct, he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but gentle. The woman flinched at the sound, her eyes snapping upward. She blinked in confusion, then in recognition. The disbelief was evident on her face. Of all people to stop in front of her, she hadn't expected Donald Trump. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching slightly to meet her gaze. She hesitated, as though unsure if she should respond. Finally, she said, "Teresa. Teresa Hensley." Her voice was shaky, but there was a trace of dignity in her tone. "You're a veteran?" he inquired, noting the pride she seemed to carry despite her circumstances. "Yes, sir," she replied, nodding faintly. "I served in the Army for 12 years. Got injured overseas, and well, things haven't been easy since then." Trump's expression shifted, the weight of her words settling over him. He noticed the deep lines etched into her face, signs of hardship and resilience. "Why are you out here?" he asked, his voice softening. "Don't you have a place to stay?" Teresa shook her head, lowering her gaze. "I lost my apartment a few months ago," she said. "I couldn't keep up with the rent. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but it's hard. Nobody wants to hire someone like me." Her words hung in the cold air, raw and unfiltered. Trump remained silent for a moment, absorbing the gravity of her situation. Here was a woman who had given over a decade of her life in service to her country, now reduced to sitting on a freezing sidewalk, begging for help. He couldn't just walk away. "Stay right here," he said firmly, pulling his phone from his pocket. Teresa looked at him with confusion, her weary eyes narrowing. "Why?" she asked hesitantly. Trump didn't answer immediately. He stepped a few feet away, dialing a number with urgency. On the other end, his longtime assistant Margaret answered promptly. "Margaret," he said, his voice brisk, "I need you to find the nearest hotel with availability and arrange for a doctor to meet us there. Make it urgent." "Yes, Mr. Trump," Margaret replied without hesitation. "Anything else?" "Not yet," he said before hanging up and turning back to Teresa. "Help is on the way," he assured her. "But first, let's get you something warm to eat." He scanned the area, spotting a food vendor across the street. With a quick wave of his hand, he signaled a vendor, who hurried over. Trump purchased a steaming bowl of soup and a sandwich, handing them to Teresa. "Eat," he said gently. Teresa's hands trembled as she took the food. She ate slowly, her movements shaky from the cold. As she ate, Trump sat down beside her on the pavement, ignoring the curious stares from passers-by. "Tell me about your time in the army," he said, his tone inviting but respectful. Teresa's gaze softened, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. She began to speak, her voice steadier now. She talked about her deployments, the bond she had formed with her fellow soldiers, and the injury that had abruptly ended her military career. "Coming back was harder than I thought," she admitted. "I thought I'd be able to pick up where I left off, but things were different. The world moved on without me." Trump listened intently, nodding occasionally. He noticed the pain in her words, but also the strength it took for her to share her story. Minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Margaret had worked quickly. The driver stepped out, dressed impeccably, and opened the door. "This is for you," Trump said, standing and helping Teresa to her feet. She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Trump met her gaze, his voice firm but kind. "Because someone should have done this a long time ago," he said simply. The SUV whisked them away to a luxury hotel. By the time they arrived, the staff, prepped by Margaret, greeted Teresa like royalty. She was escorted to a spacious suite on the top floor, where a hot shower, fresh clothes, and a warm bed awaited. A doctor arrived shortly after, providing medical attention and advice for her recovery. Meanwhile, Margaret had contacted Veterans United Support Services, a nonprofit specializing in helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. Within an hour, their representative, Lisa, arrived to meet Teresa. "Teresa," Lisa said warmly, sitting beside her, "we're here to help you with housing, job training, and anything else you need. You're not alone anymore." Tears streamed down Teresa's face as she listened. She turned to Trump, who stood quietly in the corner, his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. Trump stepped forward, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You've earned this. You served this country, and now it's our turn to serve you." By morning, Teresa's life had already begun to change. Veterans United had secured temporary housing for her, and Trump's foundation had committed to covering her rent for the first year. Before leaving, Trump handed her a check to cover immediate expenses. As he prepared to go, Teresa stopped him. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice steady now, "you've changed my life in ways I can't even describe. Thank you." Trump smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "Pay it forward someday." "I will," she vowed, determination shining in her eyes. As Trump walked out of the hotel and back into the bustling city, a quiet sense of fulfillment washed over him. In just a few hours, a life had been transformed, and for Teresa Hensley, the future suddenly looked bright.